Hello, hello. So, a new organized play season is upon us, a new competitive year. We are now moving into the 2025 organized play cycle, with Worlds just behind us, marking the end of the 2024 cycle. And around this time of year, last year, and I think the year before, I like to do what I sort of call top prospects videos, where we talk about characters that did not top in the previous year or characters that are upcoming that have a chance to be pretty good. But the state of things as they are, we are kind of waiting on the March ban list to really get any sort of lay of the land. So it's kind of hard to make character assessments and character judgments right now with things being the way that they are. So I thought instead I would talk about individual cards. Some individual cards that did not show up in top cuts in the 2024 competitive season. So there's a little bit of elbow grease. We went through UVS Ultra, the tournament list tab, and grabbed every list, every form code, right? Copy paste form code from every deck list from all of the top cuts of the past year, excluding the two events that were character restricted, where you could only play a character from this set or that set, that sort of thing. And we pasted them all into a doc and we cleaned it up and we got a big list of everything that has seen play. And then I kind of mucked around UVS Ultra looking for cards that I thought were pretty cool that turns out did not see play. So I've picked 10 of those that I think are pretty good, are pretty interesting, that, you know, it's not necessarily surprising that they didn't see play for one reason or another. The meta has its ebbs and flows. Some symbols come and go. Some, you know, sometimes you're just not allowed to do certain strategies for a while or whatever. But nonetheless, you know, these cards have a chance to be interesting or relevant at some point in 2025. So I want to talk about them and call them the forgotten cards of 2024. And so we'll go through 10 cards, I'll yap about them a bit, and that'll be the video. So, first things first, we have Unbreakable Cheer. Unbreakable Cheer did not show up in any top cut deck lists in 2024. This is a pretty neat foundation. It is a 4-check, but it's a 2/4 plus 2 high block. And it flips after you mill one or more cards, you can put one of them on top of your deck. So obviously the idea would be to ideally pair this with some sort of draw effect in a deck that is doing a bunch of milling. And, you know, the self-mill decks, the Endeavor at the start of the year was off of Order. The other ones, they've mainly been off of Death, but there's been like a Fire one or two that maybe could have played this card but didn't. But, you know, moving forward, we're getting, you know, more and more attuned cards, more and more decks that might splash some of that stuff in. We have in particular, pretty good Chaos Spam and Fire Spam attuned that both mill you for different reasons. And so yeah, we could start to see this one a little bit of selective, not necessarily card draw, but turning the card that you do draw into something selective. One of the funnier things you can do with this, you can play the card whose name I'm blanking on right now, though, the 1/5 4-mid, Father Sin, or no, something like that, where you play it and you mill 4, and if you mill 2 attacks, you draw 1. If you have Unbreakable Cheer out, if you do mill the 2 attacks on that, you can go ahead and pick which one of the 4 cards you just milled to draw if you want. So that's pretty neat. It can also just, you know, stack a Goodle on a 6-check if you're playing some of those. So this card has a lot of neat and interesting use cases. A little surprised nobody's, you know, found room for it in a deck just yet, but this is one of those cards that, you know, keeps going onto lists that I'm tossing around, and haven't necessarily brought any of those to regional, or even, I think I brought one of them to a local the other week, but it's a pretty cool card to keep an eye out for when you're building decks as something that you might want to run. Next up, we have Charring Flurry. This one, you know, obviously I would like the card that Sam's saying, but this is a very good one. It does cost the momentum, but for your trouble, you get to seal any 2 non-character cards, which means you are allowed to hit assets or backups if you so choose, which is very, very intriguing. There are not a whole lot of ways to deal with assets right now. They're added like 1 or 2 new ways to go pick off a backup in Critical Role, but in some, you know, some conditional asset hate where you have to like land an attack or something like that, but Charring can just get rid of it in a way that, you know, Water can do with Kraken. Death and Fire do not necessarily get to do so much. But if you're gonna play a game where you're gonna end up with some momentum for one reason or another, you can turn around, hit the Charring Flurry, take a couple things out. You can even commit and freeze one of them just like it's Kraken. But if you want, you can hit the asset. Right? You're not limited to only committing and freezing a foundation. You can seal and then freeze the asset if you so choose. And it's a 3 low for 5 to 7, depending on if you got the freeze off, has stun 1. It can be your low zone mix-up. It has a nice block. It's just a good, solid all-around card that, the math hasn't really added up for it in 2024, but I would keep it in mind for 2025, especially like if we get a range theme coming back in one of these upcoming sets for one reason or another. There's like a little bit of one with Zeke stuff in AOT2 that maybe doesn't quite sum up to a fully ranged deck, but we still have the traces of some range theme stuff between this and some Wolfwood stuff and things like that. So definitely, obviously I'm always going to have Charging Flurry on the mind, but just in general, this is a pretty good solid card. Next up, Malicious Evil, keeping with my snipe theme. I promise these will not all be snipes. But this is one that I am surprised to not see play. This is the 1/5 from the Ghidorah deck that flips to shut out abilities on any rival foundation for the entire enhanced step. This is mostly an offensive tool, but sometimes it can be defensive to save you from a Thunderous Roar or something like that. But I'm notably surprised that the Elder Toguro one-shot decks were never running this. Not even like seeing a couple copies in the sideboard, because it is one of the only ways, if not the only way, they have to deal with something like the new number 1. Something that can't be chomped away. Cards like that can be tricky for them to deal with, and Malicious Evil would give them another way to do so, but obviously the Sports Festival champion is rotating, so that's not going to be too relevant of a deck necessarily. Elder Toguro could still be good in plenty of other ways. But just in general, as we get this rotation going, as some spam rotates out, you need to look for other spam to play. This is a pretty fine one. Maybe not a 4x, but like, a 2x, or maybe something in the sideboard. You can bring it in if there's, a reset or something like that that's causing you problems depending on what your deck is doing. Next up, we have Connecting the Dots. This is just a cool one. So this is from the Star Trek Challenger decks, and you may have like read this once and not thought too much about it, but it's pretty interesting. I talked about this one in the Scanlan video, but it's also just kind of a neat card in general. So it's a 2/5. It response removes after enhance ability is played. So, I mean, ideally, you just have an enhance on your character or something. You don't need to worry about that part. It's kind of a funny timing. I'm not quite sure if there's a flavor to that or something like that. But essentially, as an enhance, right, de facto, you get to pick up a foundation, and then your check to block this attack gets +3. People who hate Determined Advance may note that that is very useful against Determined Advance in particular, because you're not reducing the speed, you're buffing your check to block. But essentially, right, this is sort of that if you have good block mods on your foundations, you have a spread of +2s or even +1s. This is like a -1 or -2 block mod Omni block, which is kind of crazy, at the cost of you are going to be down 1 foundation at the end of it, right? But pretty neat, interesting, solid card. We've got a bunch of action-themed stuff coming out. I wouldn't be surprised to see this packed into those a little bit. If they're not like Allure, you need the action to sit in your card pool, so it's not great there, but in some other cases it could be pretty handy. I don't think it shares a symbol with Percy for the commit, which would be interesting, but yeah, just a good tech block. And if you're building face-down foundations, it's all the better, right? You would have a chance to use this on offense to go ahead and pick up a possible attack that you have there, but primarily just a good block trick, especially for people worried about Determined Advance. Next up is Wind Barrier. I just like this one. I kind of get why it hasn't seen play. So it's a 3 difficulty, 3 mid, 3 +1 mid, breaker 1 block. And while it's in your card pool, your rival's attacks get -2 speed. And then it has an enhance if its speed is 5 or greater, it gets +2 damage. So if you are putting speed up but not putting speed down, which is, a lot of characters do both, speed goes up and speed goes down, and then it's a little redundant. But if you're just a speed goes up character, this is a 3 difficulty, 5 damage move with a breaker block on it that makes the rest of your blocks for the turn easier. Which is, not a slam 4x backbone of our offense type of card, but it is a pretty handy card. 3 difficulty is a relevant factor, and getting 5 damage on those is good. The block has breaker on it, which can have some use cases. So, again, one of those cards that it's not going to be the, a 4x main driver of your deck or anything, but a pretty good, block coverage, get a mid block, get a little breaker in there, get a little help blocking later things if your deck is sort of short on speed hate. You know, as cards like, not on symbol, but I think of graceful maneuvers rotating. You know, we're losing some speed hate, and a lot of the speed hate we're gaining is kind of one-shotty. So if you're a little thin on that stuff and you want to fill your deck with just a 5 damage move you can fit in at the end of a string, Windberry is a pretty interesting one. Next up is Monster Zero, another one from the Ghidorah deck. 3/5 foundation. There's a couple 3/5 foundations on here. I think I got a few in a row here that I just put together. Got a +1 mid block, so even though it's unique, you're not too scared to run multiple copies. And this just strips a card from their hand. It removes it and makes them remove a card from their hands, which dodges some number of anti-discard effects, funnily enough. And if they happen to have 8 or more foundations, you can also get 3 damage on it. You know, we're starting to see, you know, perhaps Vax, perhaps just in general, I think, shoot, what's it called? Backstab or Throat Slitter or something like that from the Critical Role set has a little bit of a discard theme going on. You know, Vax makes them discard a card. Obviously, try Gravity Beam, takes a card out of their hand. The idea of discard as a strategy, thinking of Yasha as well, is starting to get a little bit of legs, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this card start to show up. This is another one, you know, I'm kind of surprised, right? We've seen a lot of Try Gravity Beam in top cuts, but nobody's doubled up and ran Monster Zero on top of it. I think it's a lot of being scared of Botan's coaching, just drawing the card if you do empty their hand, but yeah, we can work through that, right? So yeah, this is a pretty good one. Next up in the 3D flip, Shortcake Admirer. This is a Girl Power rare foundation. Like a lot of Girl Power cards, that set came out and then Godzilla came out, and a lot of Girl Power got a little taken over in the mind space, but this is a strong effect. This is a 3/5 to low block. Remove, you get to spend a momentum to pick up a high attack from your card pool. So, you know, de facto, what this is essentially doing is it blows up to give any of your high attacks echo. Essentially, except that, you know, if you want, you can do some timing stuff where you later in the string you go pick up the high attack and then play it at the end of your string instead, but and you know, you get around keyword hate, etc, etc, etc. But a pretty strong effect that I think it's just the symbols, right? There hasn't been a whole lot of firing good being played. Chaos decks have been very heavy on the lows, very heavy on the, you know, Blue Flame Torment, Smashing Stomp, Walk the Dog types of lineups. But you know, as the card pool shifts and we get different things coming in and coming out, would not be surprised to see Shortcake Admirer start seeing a little bit of play here. The last 3 diff we have is Exam Strategy. This is another one of those Girl Power cards that, you know, kind of came out and then Godzilla hit and we kind of moved on, but this got some chatter early on. I guess we haven't had many, if any, Devil Jins in top cuts, but this is probably a card the Chaos Devil Jins are running, I would assume. But some other stuff can too. Enhanced Destroy, this attack gets a speed and a damage for each attack in your card pool. If you're building Bow on Earth, this is probably the reason why you're doing it. But other decks, you know, even just a general deck that's playing a string without necessarily clearing its card pool could get this up to 3/3 or 4/4 on a kill turn, you know, without too much trouble, and having that threat hanging over your opponent's head can kind of change their math. It does have the Deflect 2 on it as well. It's just kind of a good quality card that, you know, maybe with some 3 diffs rotating out, this one starts to see some room to get a little play, you know, with all the stuff coming in. Last 2 are cards I think we're fairly certain to start to see more of. Soon TM. One of them's Audio Reverberation, actually never showed up in a top cut, which sort of surprises me, but not too much. This is the 5/3 secret rare from Girl Power, 4 low 7. And I think one of the problems with this card is it has response card pool. After your blocked attack resolves, your charge attacks get +1 damage this turn. So it makes people feel like they need to be on a charge attack lineup, and the charge lineup options on these symbols are not fantastic. But what we do have more and more of are things encouraging tech lineups that even if you don't have the charge keyword, this can just be one of your 5 difficulty tech attacks, and it's a pretty good one. Because its other 2 abilities, if they have 8 foundations, they immediately, as an enhance, have to put a ready one on the bottom. And then if it hits, no matter how many foundations they have to put a committed one on the bottom of their deck. So this is a potentially 2D build. And, you know, if they block it, then, you know, that's a low block that they don't have for your charged alien sploof, which, you know, presumably would be, you know, in the meat and potatoes of any given tech deck. The tech decks have a bit of a low overload line going on like that, so this is pretty good in that sense. Now, obviously, I played this in Chronostasis to pretty good effect, but just overall, this is just a good, solid 5-3 for those tech decks, and you just kind of don't think too hard about the response. And the last card on my list is Lacquered Chain Prison. This one, I assume we're going to see more of just from people playing Good Symbol Mitchell Cimino. This is a pretty good card for that deck because he wants to be reviewing cards, and this has a pretty potent review trigger where they have to commit a foundation and flip a ready foundation just because you reviewed this thing. Its base rate of 5/3/5 low 4 is not exciting. It does have a nice deadlock on it that's kind of relevant. But really, the tricky part about this card and the thing that's held its back is that it's pretty hard to get that combo enhance to work. It is combo breaker, which means you need to be playing attacks with breaker. And if you sort of go through the symbols and look at the breaker attacks on them, exciting breaker heavy attack lineups for decks on these symbols haven't really developed until kind of recently. Mikasta's Flying Knee on the life symbol is nice. The Bedazzled Helm, which is air attuned, but anything attuned, you know, you can find a way to make it work. That one's pretty interesting. It's had some stuff on the good symbol, but the good symbol hasn't been seen play. So, you know, this card's kind of been on the outside of people's thoughts, but the combo enhance, if you do get it, is a, you know, 3 damage and the enhanced stat, just a little, you know, 5 low 7 pseudo flash move, give or take. If you're like Deku, you might have primed some stuff onto it. So this has some angles. It's a little bit of a something to watch out for as a card that you might 2x if you look at your attack lineup and you realize that a lot of it just has breaker. This one can be, you know, pretty sneaky good, and, you know, the worst case of you hold on to it as a high block and then review it is perfectly fine here, right? And that will do it for my little 10 card list of 10 forgotten cards from the 2024 season. I may do something else with this data, right? Maybe I'll do cards that I'm actually like really surprised didn't get played, which is a bit of a different list than, you know, necessarily cards that I think are really good. It's sort of similar, but it's not quite the same. Or maybe, you know, I'll do some other stuff with all the funny math that I put together here. Or we'll just do top prospects after the ban list or something like that, right? Yeah, that'll be all for today. Hope you enjoyed this. Are there any cards that you think of that, you know, obviously you're not going to have the spreadsheet or whatever that you think didn't see play, that you think people should be playing, right? That people should be playing more of or paying attention to as we go into 2025. There'll be a fun comment section to read through. So yeah, hit that up, and until next time, have a good day.